Episode 5. Brandine, do you think we'd make it this far?
With you? No.
I walked into that one.
You did walk
I did walk into that one. Fun statistic.
Mm-hmm.
If you make 20 episodes, podcast episodes, 20 podcast, you know this, young Daniel? 20 podcast episodes, you're considered in the top 1% of the world of podcasting.
15 to go, baby.
So we're just about to creep our way into the top 20%.
The bar is not high.
Listen,
The bar is not high.
we've discussed over-engineering things, okay? When we hit episode 20, we're telling everyone that we're top 1% of podcasts.
Are we going to celebrate?
How do you want to celebrate?
Question mark. Just endless montage, like an old school like.
Live to
win.
Just
Till you die. Come on.
oh, awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, enough of that. Episode 5.
We're
Third
talking
attempt here.
about serious
Episode 5. Last time we discussed nutrition. This episode is all about training. So we're going to break down what we do in terms of training, of how we screen clients and how we actually create a personalized plan. Because a lot of plans out there are, do it with me, Brandine, personalized.
personalized cookie
And they're
cutter.
personalized for everyone.
Mm.
Everyone gets the same personalized plan. And it's generic, and we are individuals. And we need to be treated like
You get a deadlift. You get a deadlift.
You all get a deadlift.
You all get
Look
the
under
same
your
movement.
chair right now. You get a squat.
Even though your bone density and length and muscle fiber length and ligaments and movements in your job is completely different to everyone else, we're all going to treat exercise like it's a one size fits all.
And it's not. So what do we do to counter that? We screen people. Of course, we take into consideration the goal, the time frame, what we're trying to achieve. And we put it together in a nice little programming bundle that gets results. But not everyone has a trainer that screens, and not everyone has access to us, and they're not training with us yet. So we're going to give some insight on how you can progress your training safely and effectively on your own as well.
Yep.
So let's get into it. Where do we start when we're going to train a new client?
So first thing I do is I check their switch count. I'm sorry.
This is a switch kick heavy episode.
I'm sorry. No, so the first thing we're going to do is we need to assess movement mechanics and how they're currently moving. So you can get a bit of data on what's firing, what's not firing, what's overworking, and the biggest thing is about what are you doing most of the week? What position are you in? That's my biggest thing. Like if I'm got an office worker, well, I already know the angle I'm going to be addressing it versus someone who's say a concreter or something like that.
Yes, yeah.
Completely different.
Massive, that takes a big percentage of the focus.
Oh, it's everything, yeah.
Right? Because if they're sitting like this every day.
Yeah, you already know the positions that are going to be kind of molded there.
Yeah.
So basically, what it is and what we're getting at here is what you do for work, what you again spend the most time doing. Your body is going to mold and base off that shape. So if I'm seated this angle, right? Well, I'm seated. My glutes are inactive here. My quads are very tight because they're getting stretched out. My core is inactive because my back, my thoracic is collapsing onto it. There's a lot of other moving parts without going into full detail. Shoulders roll forward,
and
lats are inactive, traps are elevated.
I'm sure a lot of people, office worker type, sedentary work type people would kind of relate to this, the tight neck, tight traps, headaches from the stiffness, that's something that definitely needs to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, and so just basing off what we do there, we have, is it 5?
5,
movements? Yeah, we got 5 main movements. So the main ones that we assess on, so we got bodyweight squat, it's very basic here, overhead squat, back bend, forward flexion, and the clat test.
We have to give credit where credit is due. Just quickly pat the wolf statue. We utilize Mark Turbo Enterprise Fitness. We use their screening method. So shout out to them for the always gold.
With our own little elaborations on things as well too.
Our version of that.
Yeah. We adapted what works better for kind of our client base and the type of people that we tend to draw in. So I'll go through like basics of what we're looking for, just so you can kind of see the detail of what we look for and why when you just walk into a gym and just picking up a weight and start doing it makes zero sense. It's literally crazy. In my world, that is like psychotic.
Well, as a purist, right? Like as a training purist who understands how the body works.
I feel like we're training just on that. You do have to be a purist if you want to do it right and you want to not be injured and not like, again, like, how many times it's normalized. What I'm getting at here is like how many like, oh yeah, my back always hurts when I squat or when I deadlift. Oh yeah, it hurts your back. People are like, oh, deadlift's a bad movement because it messes up your back. It's like, no, you're not doing it properly.
Yeah,
like you just
the
don't
exercise isn't what hurt you.
It's not the exercise. You hurt you. It's technique, right?
Right. How many people have you rehabilitated with lower back injuries by doing deadlifts? Like building them up to deadlifts.
All of them.
Checking those prerequisites that you need for a good quality deadlift.
All of them.
Then deadlifting to solidify them.
Including a client with a broken spine.
All of them.
All of them.
Yeah. So it's not the exercise that hurt you. It's your form and your understanding. But
it's the cues and the movement. So, all right. So we'll start with like the squat, for example. So common pitfalls we're looking for. And I won't go into specific details so it's actually usable instead of giving you like exact details like knee valgus and pronation and things like this, right? So we're looking for like knees caving in, arches collapsing, lower back rounding in a deep squat, torso leaning too forward.
Heels lifting.
Heels lifting, which would be a lack of dorsiflexion. So we're looking at what a squat should be mechanically, how it's designed, and what the client's doing and how that reflects on each other.
Yeah.
And then filling the gap is going, okay, well, this squat looks like this squat is how it should look. Got a few things popping up here, okay?
Yeah.
Why are those popping up, okay? What are we doing? And this is where it leads into what we're doing through the week.
I think what's important here as well, you look at it like a squat, this impacts your day-to-day. This isn't just about training. I remember a funny conversation I had with someone at Fitness First was this guy didn't want to train his legs, basically. And he thought that just riding a bike would be enough to train his legs. And I asked him, well, when you pick things up, how do you do it? And he's like, well, I squat down and pick it up. I was like, okay, you don't ride your bike down to the object and pick it up. You're using your legs, right? He's like, I get where you're going with this. Like, yeah.
Well, a simple one, like
part of life.
Work health and safety, which is applied in every workplace. What do they tell you when you're lifting things up? No matter how, bend your knees.
Bend your knees.
Now, if you can't bend down your knees and get your glutes active at the base of a squat, there will, by definition, functionally, you can't even do work health and safety. So this is why I said before, like for me, purists, like doing movements that there isn't variations.
There isn't another way.
It's how it has to be done.
Yeah.
Of course, there's variations on movements.
Yeah, regressions and progressions,
which
for sure.
change different leverages and things like that. But the basis here is, a squat, I want that spine upright. I don't want those hips folding under.
Yeah.
I need my glutes spreading there at the base. We need knees going past the toes. Right past
they'll
the toes.
Explode.
Oh, your knees. If your knees go past your toes, your knees will blow out.
They'll explode. Haven't you heard of knees behind toes guy?
Yeah, your knees. I love that one because it's still crazy how it's still in gym culture. Try to squat with your knees not going past your toes. Try it. You can't.
You can't. You'll fall over.
You can't. And you're going to be in a lot of pain too. Your meniscus is going to be screaming.
There's hip dominant squats which have less knee flexion, of course, but like still, like you have the range for a reason.
So without waffling on too much and having a bashing session on the whys that people are doing here, like what I do see is like, I can't go into dorsiflex. I can't get my knee past my toe. I'll do something different. It's like, no, attack why you can't do it.
Yeah.
That's what
work on the imbalance, work on your imbalance.
Yeah.
But I don't think people even know they have the imbalance, which is again why we do the screening.
Yeah.
We're not trying to show you that you're just bad at moving.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to show you how you can fix it and improve and how it is impacting your day-to-day life as well, not just your training life.
Exactly. So going off that, so if you're looking, again, in a squat, if you're looking at what would be overactive, for example, right? So this is, when we say overactive, this is actually good muscles. They're actually strong. So overactive muscle or a tight muscle, like people go, oh, my back's sore. It's like, it's because your back is strong.
Yeah, your back's doing all the
right?
work.
It's doing all the work here. So this is what we're going to look for and what's over, and this is where you start understanding ratios in programming, right? What are we going to give the most volume to and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
So overactive muscles in a squat, if we're going off what we just listed, of what we'd be seeing there, adductors, pulling knees inwards. TFL, that's the big one that we usually see for office workers, tight TFLs. Tight TFL and quads is very screaming that is weak glutes. Glutes are not doing anything whatsoever.
You get a lot like inactivity, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and the byproduct of that as well. So TFL and quads, hip flexors. It's all frontal plane, right?
Yeah.
Now, again, it's as simple as your glutes are not doing anything there. And what's the basis? The main thing in a squat, and this applies to most men specifically. What is it? The population? What is it? Like not 70%, 80% have dysfunctional hips by definition.
I actually don't know the stat,
I can't remember the exact
but
number.
I know that
Quite high.
I know from screening people, it's high.
Very high.
I
And
most people.
you'll notice too, it's men
Yeah.
struggle way more.
Well, you'll see it too, right? People come in with back pain and they're just attacking the core and blaming the back for being weak, as you just alluded to. But then you can't separate the hips from the spine, and they don't know how to. I have the sword for a reason. They don't know how to hip hinge properly, so they can't do this basically.
Horizontal movement.
Yeah,
It's not vertical.
so. And once you restore that function, the back pain starts to ease off, the right muscles start to strengthen, the tight muscles start to loosen and have more range.
Yep.
Voila, you don't have as much back pain anymore, you have none.
Yep.
So I'm not sure on the exact number for that
It's quite
statistic,
it's something
but
quite
based
high.
off screening people for years, it's most people that come in, to be fair.
And just on that with men and women, the difference of why I did that too, it's hormonal. Men are more upper body dominant. Women are more dominant in the lower body. So you tend to find women obviously will find the glutes and activating them a lot faster.
Yeah.
There's a lot more other components to this. Honestly, we could probably just do a 2-hour-long podcast on just a squat. I'm not kidding.
Yeah. But
so
we want to keep it simple and actionable.
So try and move through some things here.
And explain our methods before we give how to apply to yourself as well.
So if I'm seeing all these here, so here's the question of like, so if I saw, for example, like kind of put you on the spot a little bit, but let's say if I saw knees caving in, the butt wink, the base of a squat, falling forward, straight off the bat, what would you be looking at in terms of what you're then breaking up to accumulate to getting them to do a squat?
Yeah, well, look, if I'm seeing them falling forward, start at falling forward, can be a few things, of course, and there's further investigating required just to kind of confirm what your findings. But I'm looking at tight hip flexors. Again, let's say you're the office worker and I know you're sitting in this position. You are going to be stiff at the front here. Tight hip flexors pulling the body forward. Inactive core, potentially weak core as well. Depends, again. But definitely a lack of activity, a lack of bracing. I find a lot of people struggle with breathing mechanics. So they think like engaging your core is squeezing your abs really hard, but not necessarily. No, there's more to it. Diaphragmatic breathing, that could be a podcast. Breathing mechanics. Yep. But I'm looking at that. I'm looking at the tight hip flexors. I'm looking at the core, the inactivity in the core. Look, if they're holding a weight, it could be so much more. Yeah, we're going to get to the glutes too. Especially if you're seeing that knee cave, but inactivity in the glutes, then they're not strong enough, they're not working, then you're falling into this position here where your knees are caving in. It could be all of the above, it could be one of it.
So with all that, like if I was to
things.
look with all that information there, is what we look to do then with programming is like, okay, well, we know that if we put a squat in here, which is what we want to be doing, we're not going to be able to do it. So we need to break up these movements and isolate what's inactive to bring it up to the level of the strongest muscle. You're only as strong as your weakest link, right? I see this a lot, like with people when they're trying to do pull-ups, for example. They're benching, they're working the lats, and they're doing the right thing, like loading lats. Like Colin was a good example of this too. We pinpointed there was a slight imbalance there, missing the lower traps. Yeah. Right. So the pinch on the retraction was not there because we're not getting a full retraction, so we can't fully lock out. So you get to a point where you're like, okay, well, the lats are getting really strong now. Let's try this pull up, and it's like there's something not quite
still
firing
something
here,
functionally missing.
And if you go back, it's a couple phases that something's missed, and that comes back to understanding the screening and going quite in depth. And things do happen like that, where some things like you program stuff, and it's like I always tell people it's got to be a trial and error because when you're doing a 10, 15, 20-minute screen, you're not going to get every bit of data, right?
You find more, you're going to get the majority, and then as you're working with the person, discussing
start fleshing it out.
You'll find more. And this is where it is really tricky to do it on your own, right? Because let's say person we just assessed right now with the tight hip flexors, inactive core, weak glutes, falling forward on the squat, well, now they go and put a bar on their back because they've been, that's what they've seen and they don't know any better, which is not at their fault. What's that bar on your back going to do?
Well, the problem with the bar on the back there is like, if you think about this, if your body is capitulating under body weight, by definition, you are weaker than gravity. right?
Don't be weaker than gravity.
Yeah, well, it's true. Unfortunately, it sounds harsh, but
Yeah.
it is what it is, right? Because if I go down to a squat and my core can't even stabilize my own
Yeah.
body weight, there is no reason that weight needs to be added at this point. Because if
No.
you're adding weight, you're just going to emphasize what is already going wrong in the movement, right?
Yeah.
So if we move on to other ones, so other things we'll look for through like overhead squat. This is a good one. Here's the secrets on this. Not actually looking at your squat.
No, not at all.
Don't care about your squat. I've already looked at it. It's overhead. It's over the shoulders. We're looking at the upper body on this one. So,
Yeah.
Again, things we look at is arms fall forward, lower back arching, knees caving in. But these you can see it's linking up the same as a squat, but the outcomes of what we're looking for are different. So
Yeah.
arms falling forward, limited shoulder mobility, tight lats. Lower back arching, excessive lumbar extension, anterior pelvic tilt. Right. It
For
goes on,
women
it goes
as well,
on.
you see what you see is they have the mobility. I'm so glad I brought the sword. They have the mobility, but then as they start, the arms go forward as well. It's also a big weakness in the upper back because you mentioned it earlier. In terms of lower body, women and men can actually be quite similar when trained, of course, depending on training level, training age. But upper body wise, there's a big difference hormonally, and structure is very different. So you do see a lot of that upper back weakness.
Yep.
And tight chest, tight
That's the
chest
big
as well.
one there, yeah.
But see, we're not assessing necessarily the squat pattern at this point.
Absolutely
It's
not.
more for the upper body. And maybe some confirmation with what we saw in the squat previously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so again, some overactive muscles you'd be seeing there. Pulling the arms down, lats. Okay, overactive. High hip flexors contributing to the anterior pelvic tilt, folding the hip inwards. Calves limiting dorsiflexion, forcing the feet to turn out. So why I'm saying all these, because if you're doing your movements and you hear like, oh, I do some of these, it's like, well, good, you got some imbalances in your movement. This is why I always say to all my clients, when you do a movement, you shouldn't be coming out of it in pain. Your pain should be alleviating. Of course, you're going to get DOMS of fatigue, like you're doing squat, because your legs are going to burn, but it shouldn't be normalized. Oh yeah, my back gets sore after I squat. No,
Also,
it's not. No.
the basics work. The basics work very well. If you find the areas that you are lacking and you're weak in, those imbalances, and you address those, it is extremely taxing. You will be sore, but in a good way. Like if you find, yes, my glutes don't work, I don't use them, and before you start squatting, you do a bit of glute work, really controlled, like say glute bridges, single leg glute bridges, something of that nature. You will feel it. You will feel it a lot because finally that muscle's switching on, it's working, it's doing its job. And that goes for a lot of these dysfunctions. So it is extremely tiring. You don't have to overcomplicate and overdo things and start going and hitting barbell movements off the bat and you've never trained.
I've got a story on that too. I worked with, I won't name them. I've not worked with them, but I had a bit of a little back and forth, and we were doing some programming with a YouTuber, a football YouTuber, like in Europe. He's got a good little fan base, works with Rio Ferdinand and stuff like that. And he showed me his program. He had plantar fasciitis.
Yeah.
And he showed me the program that this EP given him. And I'm like, this is crazy.
Exercise physiologist.
Yeah, it was like the most. Oh, and again, I asked him, like, the problems remain with him. He still, to this day, has this problem. It hasn't gone away. So it doesn't work. But it was looking at activating every possible thing without addressing the simple issue. The simple issue, like, for example, plantar fasciitis, it's not inflammation. It's not any movement that you're doing. A lot of the reason it's your shoes, your toe box. Your foot gets bent upwards, for example. Your toes crunch in. Foot gets very tight. There's an artery at the base of the foot. This is Squat University. Shout out to him. He's the man.
We put things simply too.
Very simply.
So it's a good resource
very
for people
good
getting into
resource
their
to look
training.
at. Yeah, Squat University is amazing. Artery at the base of the foot is dying. And so there's actually a lack of blood flow to the muscle. The muscle it loses connection. And that's where the tension comes from.
Well, another thing we look at when we do assess people, first thing, shoes off, socks off, and we look at even the structure of the foot. Because as you mentioned, the toes should be able to splay out, but for a lot of people they can't because of the footwear that they have. So it's like this. It's like this basically, and they get really stiff. So things that we do, spend more time barefoot, train barefoot. Toe spacers are a great tool because we want that tripod of stability where we're pressing through the heel, the big toe, and the little toe. And of course, that doesn't mean the rest is up and about, but that's our areas of stability with the foot. And that has an effect up the body.
All the way up,
effect.
You'll see those main, of these two that we're talking about now, the squat and overhead squat, of where you'll see that. But what George just said there is bang on the money. Like, from the base of the foot, if the foot is tight or imbalanced, folding in, whatever it's doing, everything in between is going to be affected and contorted by it. Again, it's capitulating to gravity. The body is capitulating.
Yeah.
The way I try to analogize it to people, it's like if you put a tree and plant it in a house, right, and like inside a house, the tree will grow around what it needs to do. It will grow around, right, because it kind of shoot upwards. Your body will do very much the same thing. It will mold itself around what you're doing with it, what you're activating and what you're not activating, predominantly. And so, just addressing that. So if you think about it, like if you're someone who trains, you've been training a long time, and I get this a lot, and I will challenge it. A lot of people think that because they've been training a couple of years that they know everything, and that they're better than PTs as well too. I have actually encountered this quite a bit, which is really fascinating. But if you're thinking about like that's something that's happening to you, yes, you have a lot of imbalances, and there's a long way to go in your training, which is a good thing. That's a good thing to have.
Yeah, you got stuff to work on. But what you mentioned about the YouTuber as well, like about that over-engineered program and approach. I remember I trained a girl who, since I think she was like 6 years old, just kept struggling with knee dislocations. Always, just like walking, her knee would dislocate.
Hamstring.
Well, there was a lot. There was a lot. And then she just eventually got a knee reconstruction, and that's when I started training her. And everybody that she saw just kept looking at her knee. But again, we assess, right? But no one was assessing. They just kept looking at the side of pain. But the issues, they never looked at the issues she had outside of that. So ankle mobility was a big problem. She had plantar fasciitis. Her hips was completely like unstable, dysfunctional. And this is everything around the knee. If you look at the knee, is this empty? Can I use this? No, I can't use this. So if you look at the knee, all right, this is the knee. This is your foot and ankle. Calm down, sword. And this is your hips. If your foot and ankle or your hips are unstable, your knee's not very stable.
Absolutely.
If your hips are unstable, like the knee is just taking a lot of unnecessary load, a lot of unnecessary like damage. But if these two are stable, the knee's stable.
Yep.
So it's that middle ground. No one ever addressed the other areas. And we addressed the other areas, and since then, to my understanding, I don't train her anymore. She's never had another dislocation.
Yep.
She got herself back to squatting with a bar on her back.
Can I just guess on these ones? It was predominantly hamstring and glute issues that was really underfiring.
Super underdeveloped glutes.
But she was training her glutes, wasn't she?
I don't know, actually.
Wasn't?
I don't think so. Okay. I think she was mainly doing like cardio-based stuff.
Okay, that makes more sense. Makes more sense.
So like training, but not training it.
There's one thing I have a gripe when we're on groups on glutes right now. People who hip thrust, if you cannot fully extend your hips to full extension, that rep don't count.
Yeah.
Right? The amount of times I see people on Instagram like repping like 200, 300 kilos, and they're doing these little
little pump, glute
You're not
pumps.
doing anything. You're literally doing nothing.
Keep it in the bedroom. Keep it out of the gym.
I don't want to say it. It looks weird. I don't want to say it. No.
It makes me uncomfortable. On that though, that goes into a good little point there. I think something actionable for people who train themselves and they don't have a coach. First of all, reach out. But second, shameless plug. Don't overload your movements. Weight is not the only way to progress, and you're 100% right. The issue there with the hip thrust, for example, which is a super popular movement, especially for women in the gym, is that maximal loading is when you get that full hip extension and it aligns with the knee. That's maximal loading. If you're not getting there, your glutes aren't working properly.
Correct.
They're not going to contract.
Correct.
So rather than just squeezing your ass as hard as you can, go through the range correctly, work that full range. But that you don't need 100 kilos to do that. Start light. Build up.
I've had so many. I trained a girl once. She's like, "Oh yeah, hip thrust 100 kilos." I'm like, "Okay, sure you do." So we're going to put 40 kilos in the bar here, and we're going to do it really properly. We got 6 reps down. She's like, "I've never felt my glutes like this before."
Yeah, that's always the case.
And again, the big problem here, if we circle back to a couple podcasts ago, is ego. Is the ego? We want to show people how much we're lifting. We're not actually trying to do the mechanics here. We just want to show people, look, I lifted a number. Drop that. If you want to become good in the gym, you want that body, you want to have all the things. Get that mentality and just throw it in the bin. It has absolutely no place in the gym. It doesn't help anyone. It's good for Instagram and looks good. We don't care about
also,
that.
if your goal is physique, weight's important, of course. Moving like
progressive overload, yes, of course,
is important.
It's not,
but I'm not going to look at your physique and be like, "Oh man, he must curl this much." Like no one thinks like that.
If you're doing a bodybuilding show, they're like, "Oh, you look good, but you only bench."
Yeah, they're not going to say this guy looks stronger.
Oh, he
probably has a bigger bench.
If you're powerlifting, different story.
But I don't know of any hip thrust competitions people are entering.
What we're getting at here, and we'll go into the next couple of movements on this as well too, is movement integrity, right? So I do not progress any movement with weight, range of motion, anything like that. What I'm getting at, if I'm doing a split squat, okay, and everything looks really nice, we've got 12 kilo dumbbells each side. Okay, looks good. Now we go up to 13 kilos. Ours is a 15 kilo jump. It's a bit unfortunate, but we go up to 13 kilo jump here. And now I'm starting to see that the foot turn, or I'm starting to see the hip turning, or the knees caving in. Okay, well now we've come to the level where now this is the level of where you're at, right? Yeah. We can't progress here. We need to get really strong on what we're doing here and tighten up.
Yeah.
And then when we adapt to go to the next the next increase in weight, we might, if we're working at 8 reps, 10 reps, I might do 4. And if 4 look really nice, okay, well we're edging closer now. Okay, we might just do 1 set with an increased weight. We get 4 reps, but now it's starting to break down.
It also helps you gauge.
And you just keep working through like that. Don't rush to increase your weights.
Strength. What people forget is that strength is a skill. Strength is a skill. So you can't mess around with that skill. You never let your form be compromised. Yeah, like you can have slip ups.
Of course,
in a set, you fatigue earlier than you think, but that's more miscalculation. But if you're jumping ahead of what your body can actually do, and you mentioned movement integrity, and I love that. I love explaining what movement integrity is to clients, which is the integrity of the movement, the quality of the movement stays exactly the same.
Changes.
So things you may see is slowing down. Mm-hmm. So you might slow down, you might be more effort, more struggle, you might have to stop, brace, really get yourself tight and go again. That's fine. But you shouldn't see that you have to start rushing because it's too heavy.
I'm squatting, now my hips are rising first.
Exactly.
Or I'm changing
your back.
If you have to change, if you increase the weight and now you have to change or do something different to get this weight up, that's not your weight to be lifting.
Let's look at the squat. What do you see in the gym with the squat? You start going heavier, half rep. You start
rep,
seeing people half rep it and they start quarter squatting all of a sudden. Well, come on, like that's not going to do a lot for you other than your ego.
Your back is going to be very
jack
sore.
up your body.
Yeah.
But if you can't hit full depth, it's too heavy.
Yeah.
Or if you don't have the range yet, that's fine. Just start working the range, but don't work that range with more load.
Yep. That's my culture challenge. That's my challenge. Normalize doing like let's showcase when someone does an exercise perfectly versus how much weight you're lifting. Like that to me, if I see someone execute a squat, even I don't look at the numbers, I'm like,
yeah. Coco,
nice.
I know you're going to watch this, Coco. We spoke earlier this week. I saw Coco do a beautiful flat foot split squat. Yep. And I told her, I made a point to go up to her after a workout with Joanne and be like, that was epic.
Yeah, it's nice.
And she didn't think much of it. I was like, that's more impressive to me than someone lifting big weight because your form, and that's a higher skill movement too.
Yeah.
There's mobility demands, stability demands that you have to meet before you can do it the way she did it with weight too. Like that's impressive.
Well, it's because again too, it's like what's normalized is how much are you lifting? It's not how well are you lifting that weight, right? But again, and that's the client. I always point out to them like you just did. It's like why it's amazing to us to see a client do that is because if you do our job and you get a random person off the street and get them to a split squat on the floor with, it's not going to happen. It will be very rare. You'll get some people that will be able to do it, of course, but it won't be perfect.
No,
it will not be perfect.
Well, again, going back to screening, most people we find have dysfunction, which is fine. Like that's what your work does to you, right? And that's the whole reason why you want to have a more intentional plan when you go into the gym. But a great tip we just covered, just to recap right there, if you're in the gym on your own, look at different ways to progress yourself. Don't worry about how much you're lifting. Mm-hmm. Even if you are training for strength, don't overload. You will get stronger if you can stay in the gym healthy. Yep. But if you overload too soon, you're going to hurt yourself and you're just going to repeat the same cycle every year. Yep. I get strong, I come up, I hurt myself, I go backwards, I rehab, I come back up again. It happens again. Don't repeat that pattern. Find different ways to progress your training. Yep.
And so now the next couple that we have, it was good that we kind of went on a bit of a tangent explaining those because those two ones, the squat, overhead squat, they're going to be like the basis of your main movements, like your obviously your squat, your deadlift, even pressing overhead shoulder presses, even bench press. So there's a lot to take out of those two. The next ones are still as important, but they're a bit more specific in movement
what
patterns.
What are we looking for,
Yeah, so like we got the back bend, so spinal extension. So common pitfalls we're looking for, so lack of core stability, uneven extension is one too, that you're seeing what the QLs are doing.
Yeah, they're pulling one side to the other.
A lot of times that you see people don't realize like how you sit too. Like some people might sit like this all day,
lean to one side,
like this.
Yeah.
You don't realize, but
hiking on one hip.
Yeah, when you get up, you're in that position.
Yes.
Right, standing, even though it doesn't feel that way. So yeah, lack of back extension, arms not fully extending overhead, I don't tend to do it with my arms.
No, I go hands
arms
on
back,
hips.
yeah, because
But
I really looked.
The thing with that one as well is if you have no range, then your lower back is a bit compromised from again day-to-day life, and then you're in the gym trying to lift heavy load overhead, so you have that vertical loading on the spine.
Yep.
It's not going to be a good day for you.
Exactly.
So
right.
with someone who has a lot of limitation there, we are looking at any vertical pressing, any pressing overhead is going to be at the very least supported. It's going to be a supported press. So what I mean by that is like you've got the bench upright. So there is that additional support, and there's going to be a lot of core work, isn't there? Before we touch that stuff, make sure that the right areas are stabilized before
we can link this to the forward flexion because that's the next one. Is forward flexion, checking the hip hinge. I don't tell people I'm checking hip hinge. I want to see the forward.
Yeah.
With all these too, like it's not about doing them correctly. I actually want to see how wrong people do them, so I can actually program properly. But the forward flexion links into it nicely. So this is the big one, the core. You did say we could do a podcast just on the core. We could, honestly.
Breathing and core.
It is the most overlooked component of lifting.
And like, I don't know if it's like missed in like assessed incorrectly, but you get the whole. It's inactive, then you get your core's weak, and it's like it's not. You don't even know how to.
I think people don't understand how the core actually activates. They don't understand.
Definitely not. I think it's just back pain equals bad core.
Yeah. So to go with it, again, Squat University is a really good video. He just put up. He's had a couple of videos of this, but the way he analogized it is perfect. So if you imagine you get a can of Coke or something, right, and it's full, sealed. If you stand on it, it's going to hold your body weight. Right. If I open that can and pour a bit of liquid out. And step on it, I'm gonna crush it.
Yeah.
Right. Another one to paint. Yeah. Another one to paint the picture is imagine how skyscrapers are built. Right. So they're not just this big long pillar that just cement. It's actually hollow, and they have a cylinder through the middle that holds the pillar. And that's especially you see in Japan actually because of the earthquakes. You see how they sway. Did you see it when you went? Yeah. Did you see it with windy days?
I didn't really.
It's pretty crazy. They roll like this.
And not windy one.
Okay. So I was lucky. It's not that dramatic, but you do see them. They do really move, and they're pillared out like feet to the street where they have like these base so they can like this. But why they're able to do that is because the core of the building is built to be able to be flexible but also stabilized, right? And so you imagine your body is exactly the same. So again. If you can't diaphragmatically breathe, and so again, just to talk you through what a diaphragmatic breathing looks like, if I take a big breath in now, you can see my ribs are coming up. Yeah. Okay. This is bad. This is not breathing. This is not bracing, right? So this is not a brace. This is taking the air into the rib cage. This is not usable because my core is not in my rib cage.
But look at it, elevated shoulders, shallow, not going anywhere.
Now, hopefully you can see this. But so all right. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to push down. See my belly sticks out now. That's what I call the catch. Now I'm tight.
Catch your breath.
But that's only half of it. Now I've got the catch. I actually need to fill my stomach with air.
Yeah.
So this is where I teach it really easily is breathing into a straw. So through pursed lips. You just... If we press me down, solid. Really solid, right?
So it's a 360 breath as well. Like it's like a
cylinder around the spine.
You feel it all the way wrapping around.
Yeah, so
it
imagine,
encases you.
Yeah, so you imagine like the skyscraper. That's why I use that as an example. The cylinder of that that's what keeps that building upright. So
if there's different breathing methods to do.
So
that
there's
well,
different
but
ways.
The principle's the same.
Yeah,
like it needs to be an actual deep breath.
I think it was Gus Cook talking about piston.
Gus Cook.
Yeah, piston. So Gus Cook talked about this. The piston, your body literally, and that is a perfect analogy of what you're doing. You're becoming a piston. And so, again, the biggest thing that gets overlooked is not understanding how diaphragmatic breathing works and not how to brace the core fully. Even that in itself, like that takes progression and weeks to get it. Some people are able to do it pretty fast, but you literally have to start doing it laying down, progress to seated, to eventually standing, and there's
depends where you're at. Yeah,
it's like progressing a bench press,
and then you add load.
Yeah,
but this is what I always say as well around like if we're going to go back to squatting again. Before when I put someone under a barbell to squat, I don't want to be discussing the pattern of a squat.
No,
you
should be
know. You should be diligent with that form already. What I'm looking at that point is bracing, barbell position, and movement integrity. Can they maintain that movement integrity? Because what a lot of people do as they get progression is all of a sudden they kind of change their form because they concern themselves with the weight and manage their attention and widen the stance. They slingshot things. They use a lot of momentum. They go against what they've spent time learning, which is just it's an attention thing. It's an anxiety thing around the heavier load.
Yep.
But I don't want to discuss the squat pattern. I want to be refining the breath now that the bar's on your back.
Yep. And to go back to what I said before, people don't understand the synergies with the core. The biggest thing that people don't understand with certain muscle groups is muscles don't activate, not fully, in isolation by themselves. There is a synergizer that goes alongside it to create the process of that muscle doing its job. Yeah. So, for example, a plank is the perfect one. Nobody does planks right. No one. Most of the time when you see, you come up to people and you push them on the side, your hips will wobble all over. You're swinging like the skyscraper, right?
Yeah. What did we say? You can't separate hips from spine.
You cannot, right? And we'll go into the
spinal stability, hip stability.
Yeah, we'll go to the 3 hubs of stability. We'll explain how this all bundles together as well. But the missing component there is the glute activation. And now you can circle back when we go back to your squat and you can say, well, if we've got inactive glutes, well, by definition, your core is going to also be inactive as well too. So this is where you can see people are so giddy to get under a barbell. It's like there's a lot of things we need to strengthen just to get you under a barbell, because genuinely, every time if we say it, this is the Mark quote as well too. Again, it's just usable. To earn your barbell. You've got to earn your barbell. It's not just a safety thing. It's actually to do this. So, all right. Watching a demonstration by Gus Crook with one of the girls that was squatting, I think she was squatting like 50 kilos or something. It was quite decent for a little girl. It was quite a decent squat. It looked all right, looked good. But you could see it was a little bit of shifting and it was moving. It looked to the trained eye, you will see millimeters of degrees of motion. And you're like, no, that's not right.
His attention to detail is phenomenal.
Right? Which is what we expect of our trainers as well too, right? This is what we're aiming, and this is what we do as well too, right? Doo-doo, doo-doo. But we went through and he taught her how to do diaphragmatic breathing. I think she added about 10 kilos to a squat. On the spot.
He's big with that as well, but we see that all the time too. Like you will add so much more to your movements if you can have you're using every part of you to perform the exercise. And you know what? Like, I can see where this can sound almost a little bit overwhelming. They have to work on these things, but there's actually a lot of result from this.
Well, it's actually not that complicated because you can, a lot of these too, like a plank, for me, you like glute bridge. I like, shout out to Marshall, isometric clamshell.
Yeah, I like that too.
I mean, there's many different ways to skin a cat, but honestly, these movements can be done at home. 7 days a week, alongside what your programming is happening in the gym. Like, it doesn't need to be this crazy complex thing.
It can be a daily protocol.
Yeah.
Especially with smaller muscle groups that can take more volume like that, more frequency.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be overwhelming. There's a lot of result that comes from it. It still aligns with your goals. There's no need to rush the exercise. You'll feel a lot better when you do it, and you'll stay in the gym longer that way.
Again, it's about, if you do more of the leg work at the start, like you get this, so the 3 hubs of stability, you make sure the scaps are able to contract, retract. Our core, we can brace, right? Our spine is stable alongside lat activation, elevation, depression. These basic things, which the words sound complex, it's really not complex. These are simple movements. Then, yes, if you do those longer phases, and it will take time to learn these and do them, right? And yes, that means you're not going to be chasing big numbers and going after the physique goal straight away, but you do the hard work now, it means you're going to achieve higher.
Wider the base, higher the peak.
But try not to say it because I'm just quoting him like back to back now, but wider the base, higher the peak. The more you create at the start, understanding modalities around sleep, food, the movement patterns, go the extra mile, do the hard work, get overwhelmed by it, be challenged by it, you will ascend to such a higher peak.
I still say you're going to get better results doing it that way anyways.
You will, guaranteed.
You're like real results.
Oh, no,
you're not just going to lose muscle mass, water.
No,
you're actually going to be seeing the results.
You're doing it all. You're doing all the things.
Plank. So plank's a super common one people are probably doing on their own in the gym. Top tips for plank.
Hip extension. Squeeze your ass.
Squeeze your ass. What else?
So honestly,
number one, squeeze your glutes.
The first thing is shoulder width apart. Don't let the elbows turn in.
Yes.
Widen your legs. You're not going to be able to get your glute squeeze if your legs are too narrow, especially if you've got tight quads and you just lack of range of motion in the legs. You're not going to be able to hip extend. Get the legs slightly wider. Press the hip down. Focus on the glute. And the tension you're getting on the glute, your core will become a secondary byproduct of tension. It will naturally activate, but once that glute squeeze is there, you'll be able to squeeze the core and get a lot more out of it. On that though, if you find when you're doing the plank like that and you can't find your glutes, your glutes got to get a lot stronger.
Also, you see what a lot of people do in a plank that their back either dips in really low and they start straining their back, or the hips are really high and they feel nothing. So squeezing the glutes, tucking in nicely there is going to stop that dip in the back kicking in, and it's also going to have you in the right position.
You might have a little bit of like arch to your thoracic because the brace.
That's good though.
But that's also because of the shoulder position. That's actually good. It's as long as you want to see a plank. It can't be like a dip or different part. It's not that way.
Create tension.
Yeah, create tension. Right?
So squeeze the glutes, create tension. Imagine someone's trying to push you over. Squeeze your fists, drive yourself into the floor. Squeeze your glutes, squeeze your like brace your core. Focus on that breathing that we just discussed. Take those breaths while you're holding all of that.
And
tension.
take note how little time you can actually hold it for. Like generally people start like going for 30 seconds. You might only get 10 seconds. You're
if
done.
You're shaking, great.
That's it. Like
Shaking
Daniel this morning, perfect example.
Young Daniel
had a big week last week. So CNS was a bit cooked today. We started holding a plank. Was like 10 seconds in. Start seeing wobbles already straight off the bat. Right. That was his limit for that day. That goes back to movement integrity, right?
Yeah.
Because that's why am I going to allow the movement now to be dysfunctional? Keep going just for the sake of doing it for a longer period of time? No, that's the level for today. Right, and that's okay. Sometimes it doesn't need to. If your target is 10 reps and you only get 7, but there's 7 quality, that's better than now forcing those extra 3 reps and doing trash reps just to hit the number.
So
go to that, but that's also an RPE scale. Understanding you're exactly
that without going into the full-on technicality of that. That's really important in training too. You have to manage your expectations. They're not all going to be good sessions. And some days you're going to go in and you're going to feel weaker. So, yes, you planned on going up a weight. Last week you benched 40. This week you were planning on 45, but 45 is not happening. Don't compromise your whole training day, your whole training phase just to hit that number. Like, just back off.
Yeah, a good mentality to have, like, again, Daniel using me as an example is like, well, really tired today, so we're not going to push progression, but a mentality I try to tell to people is like, okay, well, challenge yourself today, compare your tired self now to a previous tired self. How well did you perform today? Don't worry about the numbers. Don't worry about the weights. Did you perform? Did you get through the session? Did you do it better than you did last time? Or you saw a tangible difference in some capacity because given you're doing the right things around food and sleep and you're progressing, well, that's how it's comparative. That's how you compare that there, right? You don't compare it to you on your best day when you're tired. That's crazy.
You have to be ready and willing to adapt to training.
And these days happen to all of us.
Everyone.
Every single one. Like, even if you, like, people think, like, the athletes and all these things. No.
They
everyone
have more
suffers.
than anybody.
But you know what it is? The only difference, going back to previous podcasts, mentality. They have the right mentality to understand that this is what happens in life. You don't want to have the flat tire syndrome of like, okay, you had one bad session and okay, no, well, that's it, terrible. I'm weaker now. I'm just going to eat everything. And it's what was the? It's like you get a flat tire. And you get out and you see your flat tire and you're angry, so you pop all your other tires.
It does make sense. That's what flat tire syndrome is, and it's like having a bad meal. You had one bad meal. Well, I've ruined everything now. I'll just eat whatever I want.
Crazy.
I'll just the whole day will be bad.
Crazy.
That's flat tire syndrome. You wouldn't get out of your car and slash all your tires.
Crazy.
It makes no sense. So same thing with your training. You wouldn't just throw your training out the window or compromise it all. But you will. You know why? Like again, I say it all the time. Don't seek perfection. Like just be consistent.
Perfection is subjective. It's unique to each individual. Right?
So you're gonna have days where you're not as strong. Be smart about it. Be smart about it. Think of the long-term plan. Because think of the long term. Because if you go in hard out, burn yourself out, overload every single day, and then you take that against yourself that's just consistent, trains hard but knows when to back off. If we look at that across the year of training, the consistent version is going to be way further ahead
100%.
In every aspect compared to your overloaded, overtrained self that keeps going up and down and yo-yoing.
Knowing when to stop training and when to rest takes discipline.
It does.
So it's also, you look at it as, hey, if you can't do that and then you do it, that's good. That's an achievement. Like, you've actually progressed, because it's stupid. It's like if we're sick or really sick, well, we don't go to work. Like, we take it, usually you take time off and rest. But like the gym's like, I'm broken, I'm injured. It's like, gotta push through. It's like, no, put the ego aside. You're not helping anyone. You're only hurting yourself.
It is the whole thing of like, you gotta hustle, you gotta work hard. Right. But think about it. If you're really that sick that you can't work well, for your own ego and for how people perceive you, you still go in and work. Well, how how effective are you actually
You're
that
not
day
effective.
anyways?
You're not.
Like, you can't even, it's going to be very hard to manage your attention and deliver the same quality that you normally do, right? So you might be better off to just rest and be refreshed, say, the next day rather than the next week, because you prolong it.
You're being influenced by other people's expectations of, like, oh, look at me, I'm sick and I'm still doing it.
If no one was watching you, you would act differently.
Yeah.
But the same goes in the gym. Just because you should hit a certain amount of weight or just because you loaded it up doesn't mean you can't go back down. So you start the set, like, let's say you load up the barbell, it was a little too heavy, and then you're like, oh, well, I have to stick to this down. No, you don't. You can go back down.
And on that too, if you do watch people on YouTube and Instagram and you want to hit big numbers and things like that, what they don't show you is their slow progressive overload to get to those numbers. Like, powerlifters didn't just start squatting 300 kilos. It's many, 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 many years and injuries and setbacks and failures and wins of getting to it. It's not, and also too, you're not just always squatting 300 kilos.
No,
There's the
you're
difference
peaking
between
for it.
there's performance, and then there's days where you just got to come in and do the leg work, right?
That gets to another one. If you're lifting heavy in the gym, which is like lifting your true max, that is, first of all, something a novice lifter should not be doing.
No.
Second, even if you are experienced enough, that's peaking. You should not be doing that many times in the year. Mm-hmm. Honestly, it's like a fighter fighting every weekend. I know they do that in Thailand.
Sometimes 3 or 4 times a week.
Generally, like, that's what you're peaking your body. If you're doing that every single session, you're asking for an injury. You're going to bring injuries on. You're not meant to peak your body like that.
You're not an endless renewable energy source.
If
you are, we need to study you so we can harvest you for fuels and the rest of the world, because it doesn't exist. The CNS has a battery. And it has a certain amount of energy that it can give.
Unless you were created by the Red Ribbon Army and you are
an android,
you are then, and you have renewable energy and you can fight forever.
Yeah, which is quite op. I wish I could do that. That'd be cool. But no, that's not what we are, unfortunately. And so you do have to understand that, you can't be at if you hit 100 kilos last week, good, you're not going to hit it next week. Like, you don't need, unless...
And just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, if that's your working weight and you can peak at 150, okay, well, fair enough. That's different, right?
Of course.
But what we're getting at here is don't just try to hit the big numbers all the time. You're not going to recover. You will get injured, and you're going to hit a wall, and your physique is going to suffer because you're so fixated on just trying to hit this number that you're not doing what your body needs to maintain the muscle you're gaining, everything else, because you're just fatiguing it out.
For our maybe intermediate lifters, I have a good little, I guess, system that you could implement in terms of your training weeks. You could go your first week of training, you can underachieve a little bit as you're learning new skill. You got new exercises, new skills that you're working on. Underachieve a bit.
Yep.
Then the following week, achieve. Work hard, hit what you should. Achieve again the week after that, the third week, and then overachieve. Push for 1 week, real hard. Overreach, and then the following week, week 5, underachieve again.
Yep.
Gives your body a chance to recover.
Yep.
That's a really simple way you can manage your training intensity. Mm-hmm. So underachieve, achieve, overachieve.
Yes.
And that way you are pushing. You're pushing hard, but there's always that week that balances you back out. Yep. And you see people deload. They don't really understand how to deload properly. Sometimes they do it too frequently. Sometimes they don't do it at all and they need to do it. This will give you a bit of balance. That's a real simple sort of method you could utilize for your own training.
Yep. And just to tie up, the last little test we look at, which isn't a little one, it's actually quite a big one. Clat test.
Modified clat test, yeah.
Modified clat test, yeah. Don't do it from height because, you're checking ankle stability, so jumping from height doesn't...
So what the clat test is we're getting our client to balance on one leg. We're watching what happens when they're forced to work off just on one side, and then we just get them to do a small hop forward.
Yep.
And that, when you put someone on one leg,
you see a lot.
You see it all.
You'll see where the core is weak. You'll see the lack of ankle stability. You'll see pelvic drop. You'll see knee valgus again. You'll see a lot of things that come up into it. But again, that's a lot of what you've gone through previously. Now we'll tie it all into a nice. It will basically confirm what we've been finding there around the core, the spine, and even the shoulder blades.
So self-assessment. If you're doing a squat, both legs, try doing a one leg. Like, how good are you with lunges? How good are you with split squats? How are you with a single leg squat, even to a box or to a bench? Can you do those things? Because if it is extremely different, especially from one side to the other, chances are when you're squatting, there's an imbalance you're not seeing. There's a lack of stability you're not seeing, and maybe you are seeing it, but you don't know where it is.
Yep.
Try one leg. Same thing with pressing and pulling motions. Like try a one arm. Right?
Yeah.
Try a single arm.
And so that's why even like a lot of what you'll see with us with what we do programming, the first couple, sometimes first 2 or 3 phases, it's all unilateral.
A lot of it's unilateral.
You're not doing sometimes. A muscle group can be so weak that you need to do bilateral just to get it
box
going.
Squats.
Yeah,
Box squats.
you see that a lot with like glute work,
Yeah.
hip extension. Like you will probably need to do it bilateral first to understand what you're doing.
Yes.
The single leg is going to be too hard, but then you progress to single leg to then progress to bilateral to then eventually get to a barbell. Like that's how far down the pecking order a lot of training is, and you get it's so
I
crazy.
Love programming.
Oh, it's the best.
I love training,
but it's crazy. Like just thinking of the glutes like that, right? How many people will just go, oh, we're going to start hip thrusting? It's like, no.
Yeah,
And that's what we're trying to...
If they do, again, you got to take into consideration the dysfunction.
Yeah. And so, again, recap, what we're looking for, the main things here is, so first, before any movements are progressing, how strong is your core? Are your glutes working? Spine stability and retraction. If
Depression and retraction. So
depression, elevation, depression,
function,
protraction, and retraction. So
function of
it's
the shoulder.
up,
Scapula.
down, this way, that way of the
Yeah.
scapula. Can your hip move horizontal? That aligns with core as well too. The glutes tracking backwards. Can you extend your hips?
If you're doing rowing motions and your shoulders are touching your ears,
You're
we have
trap
a
rowing.
problem.
You're not doing anything.
Your lats are very inactive.
Yeah.
And you can even test that. I mean, if you pull your shoulder down as hard as you can and feel your lats, you'll feel how active they are. But then you
Press under
shrug.
your armpit and feel how hard the subscap is locked up because you've been jacking up the elevation of your back so much that your shoulder blades are slowly winging over time and you're creating frozen shoulder. This is why when you do an overhead squat, you get stuck. Yes.
But simple assessment on yourself when you're rowing. Are you shrugging your shoulders?
Yes.
When you're rowing, are you having a hard time pulling your shoulders down into your pockets?
Yeah.
And rowing. Do you not feel your back at all when you do back work? If you don't, if you fall into that camp, you probably need to revisit your form.
I'm going to be honest.
pulling
I will
movements.
challenge a lot. This will be a lot of people. This will be most people.
Yeah. Again, we just have to look at where we fall into day to day with work.
Yep.
A lot of people are falling into this.
Yep.
Overly
And
flex position.
So look, there was a lot of waffling on there. There was a lot of tangents and things like that. And look, I fully don't expect people to listen to this and then understand exactly what to do now with training. But this will give you a clue into like, hey, there's probably some work to go there. Hit us up, ask us questions. I love answering these questions.
But I think there's some good
training.
takeaways. Like
Absolutely.
don't overcomplicate. Don't jump forward too fast. Earn your barbell. Work your way to the heavier weights. Work your way to the more complex movements.
Keep your movement
There's
integrity.
nothing wrong with machines, and when we say machines, like a lat pull down, a seated row, a leg curl, leg extensions, things like that. They're lower skill. Or I don't think lat pull down is low skill, to be honest with you. But like a leg curl, leg extension, they're quite low skill. You can do them unilaterally, so single leg. Work single leg exercise, work single arm exercises, challenge your body.
Yep.
Feel the dysfunction. You'll feel it. You'll feel the difference.
Yep.
You will feel the difference from side to side, and then you will be more aware.
Yep.
Create that awareness for yourself. Don't jump ahead. And the biggest thing you can do with your training is just enjoy the process.
Yep. And
Enjoy the process.
this is applied to mostly general population. If we're talking about athletes and sport specific, it becomes a whole different kettle of fish. The way that you're assessing and then programming the structural balance mentalities will be looked at completely different. But again, so like if you're watching this and you're like, oh, but I play football and I need to do this, I don't need to squat. It's like, even though that's not true. You
Well,
need to
also,
squat, right? But
you should have a coach.
yeah, you should have a coach.
You should have a coach, and you should have a coach that's doing this, that's screening you and tailoring the program to you.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of good takeaways here around training. But
yeah, like
just don't rush.
Yeah, don't rush. But you generally, if anything comes out of this, you're like, well, this happens. Message us. Ask us. We're happy to answer these questions and help where we can.
Get the full GT experience.
hit
Come
us
in
up.
for an assessment.
Come suss us out.
See what you
we
can
love
work
to
on.
help. But yeah, no, genuinely, like I'm personally like this is something like programming and seeing where a client starts and, for lack of a better word, how broken they are to where they end up.
Yeah, that's my favorite part.
That's the best.
When the plan comes together is my favorite. Like when you see the assessment and then people identify with their back pain and their like dysfunction, and then it starts to go away, and they go, oh wow, I don't have to live life with back pain.
I don't have to feel my body in pain at all times. Like, that's amazing.
Deadlifts don't have to hurt every time I do it. It's a pretty cool thing.
We also too just don't even realize, like, just a little side note on that. It's like how much when you're in constant pain and stuff, how it's frustrating.
And draining.
It's a little like, if I do this all day, every day,
Stop it.
eventually it gets annoying.
You're annoying me.
Right? But we just live, and you don't realize that you're just becoming a frustrated, angry person all the time because you're always
normal.
Yeah, it's your normal, right?
It's also draining to carry injuries and
if you can't
tightnesses.
tell, we can tangent in any direction forever. So we probably should just
ever. What are they doing there?
Wrap up
I like that. How'd you do that?
just cut the.
Do you want to go like scissors, paper, rock to end it?
If I win, what do I get?
How do you?
Yeah, good old rock. Nothing beats rock.
Nothing beats rock.
No, you go 1, 2, and 3. You can't count. 1, 2, 3. Dang it. We go best 2 out of 3. If I,
Go. 1, 2, 3.
Dang it.
1, 2, 3.
Dang it.
1, 2, 3. Dang it.
There's one more. This is the last one.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. You changed.
No, I did rock.
Slow motion. He went paper then rock.
I did rock. My hand.
Nice.
I didn't close my hand fast enough. Is what I did. I was like that. I didn't close my hand fast enough. I didn't close my hand fast enough. So what do I win? Yeah. Close my hand. Close my hand. I was gonna go paper, but I changed it and I went. But I did it fast enough. It's too late.
I want to see that in slow motion.
Fucking lost, bitch.
Enjoying the podcast?
You should subscribe. You should
Make
tell
sure
your friends about it. And
Yeah.
you should share it around and help us out because we really want to actually, genuinely, would like the information to get out to more people.
Yes.
Like I said at the start, a lot of what we talk about in here want this to be like normalized culture in the gym. It will change the landscape of everything and we can all live longer, we can all live happier, there can be no toxic mentalities. I know that's a big ask, but we can do it, I believe.
We can only raise the standard
Okay,
if we
raise
have
standard.
people listening.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
like the podcast.
Yes. and
Subscribe.
Subscribe.
Everywhere. Find us everywhere you can and like it.
And thank
Tell
you
us
for
what you
watching.
want to learn more about. Thanks for watching.
Khop khun krab.